Hello, everyone. I'm Awa, and I would like to start reviewing books that I start like I remember like when I was younger, I really like when I was in high school, I had kind of the habit of reading, and it was mainly because I was in high school and I had like literature classes and I had to like read certain books. But I've never really been like a big reader person, besides like when I had to read a book for like homework or something like that, which was mainly in high school, because in college I didn't really have to like read like literature, if that makes sense. But recently, especially when I started my healing journey, I have been reading some books that I feel like have helped me a lot, and I would like to share with anyone that is interested. Okay, so the first book that I would like to review is this book that is called, I think you cannot see it because it's backwards, but the book is called How to Do the Work, and this is supposed to come with like this cover, but I took it off because it was kind of annoying. So you can see the inside, even though I feel like it looks more aesthetic like this. Anyway, so the book is called How to Do the Work, and it's written by it says it here, but it's backwards for you. Dr. Nicole LePera. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Nicole LePera. She has an Instagram account that is called The Holistic Psychologist, and that's how actually I found about her work first. In this book, like now that I am more like, I've learned more about healing, and like I'm like more, I don't know, like I know more about trauma and about my personal experience, my personal traumas and stuff. I look back at this book and I think that it's really basic, but I also think that it was like a big like mind opener for me. So I remember like I first found her work on Instagram, as I said, with her name, the Holistic Psychologist. And I remember like just being blown away by the perspective that she had around trauma. I always grew up thinking that trauma, like a lot of us, we think of trauma as like this huge things that happened. Like, for example, like you think of like PTSD, like a soldier that goes to war, or a person that is in a car accident, or I don't know, like a person, like I'm from the Dominican Republic, like if you go through an earthquake or something like that. And I always thought of trauma as like something that really, really, really big happened in your life and that really, traumatized you, right? Or like affected you. And then it affects the way that you see life. It makes your life like difficult to live, and people have to work through it and stuff like that. But something that really blew me away about the perspective of Dr. LePera is that her opinion was that she has like a much more in-depth perspective of what trauma is, and how like we can experience trauma from anything, not just big, huge things that happen in your life. So for example, I have a lot of trauma, and thank God, I've never been in a car accident. I've never experienced like an earthquake. And I've never like been to war, but I do have trauma, even though like technically if somebody were to look at my life and my childhood in like a camera with no sound, they would probably think that in a lot of ways I had a perfect childhood. But I still do have trauma. And I think that was like the main huge like mind-boggling idea that I learned from Dr. LePera, and from her Instagram account, and then later with the book. So like the story is like I first found about her on Instagram, and everything that she would post is posts that were really short and simple to read and were really amazing. And sometimes like like in the description you can like read more sometimes, but like just like the posts that she would make, it was like this pictures with a few words. Sometimes it was just one picture, and sometimes it was many pictures that you had to slide. And I just feel like she would just explain with like such in a simple way the trauma and emotions, and like how something really complex that we can experience in life, she would experience it with her perspective and her knowledge of psychology and psychiatry and all that stuff. She would explain in such a simple way. So for example, one of the things that I just comes to my mind right now is like something that I always grew up struggling with was resentment, you know. I grew up in like, you know, with like in an abusive household, even though my parents, of course, they did their best and I love them to death. There was a lot of abuse in my house. I don't know if a lot of abuse, but there was abuse in my house. And even things that I was exposed to as a child that weren't necessarily abusive, but they were really traumatic for me. And that's also something that Dr. LePera talks about, that she explains how what trauma is for me might not be traumatic for someone else, because trauma is more about the experience inside of me after an event happened in my life, more than the event itself. So I grew up with like a lot of resentment, and I didn't really know as a kid and growing up like how to express my feelings with words to people, and how to, more importantly, how to process pain. I thought that pain and suffering were the same thing. So I just really didn't know like how to process pain and how to process like sadness or something that was scary for me or something like that. So because of that kind of turned into a lot of resentment growing up. And I always struggled with that resentment. Like I always felt like a lot of shame about feeling resentful. And whenever I would try to express it to someone else, people would often tell me, like adults and sometimes friends and whatever, they would tell me like, oh, you need to forgive, you need to let it go, you know? But I literally didn't know like what did I mean by that. Like, okay, I need to let it go, but how do I let it go? You know, like I don't know how to like let go of something. And I grew up in a religious environment, so I felt like in my experience there was a lot of kind of like unintentional shaming around having resentment. You know, like people would be like, you know, resentment is like, you know, drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, like you need to forgive, like it's for you and all these things. And I felt like a lot of shame around like being resentful, and I just didn't know how to process that. And that's something that I struggle with a lot. I remember like the first time that I was actually able to like really express these feelings of like what I'm saying right now, like resentment, and how do I process that, how do I get rid of my resentment. It was when I was talking with one of my friends that I met in college, and I love her to death. And we were talking about that, and it was really cool how like she was like, yeah, like me too, like I also have like a lot of resentment of like things that I don't really know what I'm resentful about, and I don't really know how to let it go. So I remember like one of the posts that Dr. LePera posted, this was like a few years ago when I found this book. It was about her explaining what resentment is. And the way that she explained resentment was so simple. I don't know if I want to talk about it here because like it would be a long video, but pretty much in simple words, she explained how like resentment is when we grew up allowing other people to violate our boundaries in a chronic way. And as a result of that, we develop resentment. So in a relationship, there's two people, right? Resentment is a result of a chronic violation of each other's, or of the other person, or somebody else's violating my boundaries in whatever context that is, right? In a severe and a chronic way, and then that creates resentment. And for me, I know that sounds really simple, and it is really simple, but that was just mind-blowing because I thought like, whoa, like I have never heard somebody put into words what I've experienced in my life so simple. It's like I felt this for a long time, but I didn't have the words to put it into, like to express it with, to express my feelings of resentment and where they come from. So it's like that's an example of like something like why I really liked her, and I really liked her work, and I just adored everything she posted, because it just in many different things, not just like resentment, but like emotions, relationships, trauma, attachment theory, like all these things that you can think about that are you know, relationships. That's the main thing, right, of everyone's life, is relationships with others. She would explain to them like all of the trouble and the trauma and the pain and the things that I couldn't express with my words, but she would explain them in such an easy way. So when I started following her and learning about her work, I learned that she was writing a book. So I was really excited. And this is the book, and the book is How to Do the Work. The work, she means like the work of healing, right? Like the work of, you know, really healing ourselves from our past experiences, from our trauma and everything. And I was so excited. I waited months like for her to like publish the video, and not publish the video, publish the book. And when the book was out, I was so happy to read it. And yeah, and in a way, I feel like the book is kind of like a summary. I don't know if the word is a summary, but it's a conjunction of all of her stuff that she has on Instagram, or that she had at the time when I started following her, and I really like all this stuff. I still love her, but like, you know, this time when like I was like so mind blown by her work and by her Instagram and her perspective and everything. And this book is kind of like a summary of that, and it's like a really good way to explain to somebody like what trauma is, even trauma that is not, as I said at the beginning, like it's not big things that happen, but like what trauma is. Something that I really love about this book is that she talks about how like, and also she talks about this on her Instagram. She talks about how like every human being's needs, I'm gonna butcher this, but I think I'm gonna get it right. But like, it's like every human being's main core needs, I think that's the word she uses, core needs, are to be seen, to be heard, and to be acknowledged. I think to be like allowed to be authentic. And for me, like she explains also like in this book, like how like in a way trauma is when we don't experience that, because that's like, those are like our core needs as children and as human beings, is to be seen, right? Like we want to be seen by people and like feel like somebody can see us. And like when we have a feeling of like, let's say like in my experience, resentment, of pain, a big reason for my trauma of things that even weren't big traumatic things, right, was the feeling that I feel like nobody could see my pain, like nobody could see my feelings. And even sometimes somebody could see it, I wasn't able to express myself in a way that I could help them see me. So she talks about like that, like how like in a lot of ways, like it's a big part of trauma is that how like we can experience, and not necessarily like what other people do, but like our experience of our childhood, even in adulthood, right, is that we don't feel seen, and that can create like a lot of wounds and a lot of core wounds and core problems later on in life, and even in the moment, is because we need that as human beings. And the other thing she talks about is like we need to be heard, right? And that was another thing like that for me that was really close with feeling seen, and feeling like, you know, sometimes like I feel like I like growing up, like I felt like I wasn't allowed to express myself about certain things that were painful or difficult for me, because it was shame, because there was taboo, because, you know, because my parents didn't know how to handle that, or they didn't have the skills themselves to help me process that. And then the third thing is like to be, I don't know if it's to be acknowledged, but it's something like to be authentically yourself, right? And that's also another thing. And I feel like that's also like really important, that like something that we need as human beings is like to be able to be ourselves and to express ourselves like how we were made and how we came out, you know? Came out, that sounds funny. Yeah, so this book was really nice. Like she also talks about her story of like her, you know, discovering all these things, and how like she was a psychologist, and how like what happened in her practice, that she over time realized that what she was doing wasn't 100% efficient in helping people. Like she wanted to help people, and she felt like she couldn't really help people 100% with the knowledge that she was taught from school. And she talked about her own traumas and like things that happened to her that were like, again, like huge things, but were really traumatic. And I don't know, I feel like she's so vulnerable and open, and she's so wise. And again, like I just love the simplicity in what she explains everything. Something that I heard from someone that I really admire, that I think is so true to me, is that the truth is simple. Sometimes we can feel like the truth is complicated, or the truth of something is complicated, and like there's a lot of like details, or like a lot of pathways, or like I don't know, like a lot of like complexity to the truth. And I feel like what I've learned in my healing experience and my healing journey, and a big thing that I learned from this book and from her work and from Dr. LePera, is how the truth is really simple, and the things sometimes that causes the most pain and suffering in our lives are really simple to see, are really simple to understand and explain, if we are willing to see it, if we are willing to be honest with ourselves, and if we're willing to do the work. So this was an amazing book. She also has like exercises for like your nervous system. She has like prompts to process a little bit, like to process a few things, and to like, examples of like what she means. She talks about inner child, which is like a huge thing, and like I feel like such a beautiful work. She also talks about like people that she has worked with, and like in her experience, like healing the inner child and doing like different healing work. And she talks about parent figures, and like she talks about boundaries, which is a huge topic. And I think I first heard and learned about the concept of boundaries through her. So like it's an amazing book that I would recommend anyone if you just want to learn about like trauma, and if you want to like see her work. If you don't want to read the book, or you're not a reader, I'm pretty sure you can hear it too, like on Kindle or whatever. I don't know. I like to read books because like I'm a reader. Like I need to like touch the book and like But if you like to hear it, then no, that's great too. I also think like like if you don't want to read it for whatever reason, like I feel like you would probably be inspired if you're interested in this work, if you go to her Instagram, because it's just so amazing. I think that's it. Like I think like this book was like the beginning for me of like really learning about trauma and really changing my perspective, and like getting rid of the shame around my feelings and my resentment and like all the other things, and really like just the healing, transformative experience of just being able to put words into my feelings and my experience and my childhood and everything. And just her posts often make me feel so seen and so heard, because it's like everything that she's saying, like it's like exactly what I feel. And it's like she has the words that I've always looked for to express myself and I didn't have, but she just explains them so simple. And I think with the simplicity, it really helps to heal when things are simple and we can see it and it's just simple. So I'm gonna make maybe like later another video about other books, because I've read a lot of books and have a lot of stories to tell. Like I hope I inspire anyone to read this book or to learn about your experience, and how like trauma, also something that she talks about is that she talks about like how like trauma is not someone's fault thing. Like it's not about like looking whose fault is it so we can blame them and shame the person. Like it's about acknowledging how we all have wounds, and none of our wounds are like our fault, or whoever the person did it to us fault. It's like a society and a generational and like lineage thing that we need to heal. And only when we are willing to see these things, it's like we can really like change our life for the better and change the future of our lineage, if you want to have kids, or for our society and our world. Because everything we do, everyone has an impact. Everything has an impact too. So anyway, let me know if you guys have any questions. Probably don't, but yeah, that's it. See you. Have a good day. Bye.